Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about some useful views for iOS app design. So what is a UI stack view? Well, basically if you've got a series of items that you want to lay out either horizontally or vertically, and when I mean items I mean UI elements, you can set constraints between each pair of these, but that's quite tedious to do. So you can also put them inside a UI stack view, and it basically handles the constraints for you, and you have various controls that allow you to have control over the spacing and sizes of the views. And there are also various options that you can use to control this. So here's a visual example of this. Here's a two-column layout that is a horizontal stack view with two elements side by side, and those two elements are two vertical stack views, each with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 labels in it. And you can see that, for example, the sliders and labels for the red, green, and blue color components that I did as part of the workshop last week, we laid those out with constraints, but you can see how that's 3 labels and 3 sliders side by side. We could have obviously displayed those as 2 vertical stack views inside a horizontal stack view, just like in this example. So I'll leave that up to you as an experiment to try out how you can do that. We're going to cover UI table views in the workshop in a lot of detail. This is the primary thing we're going to explore the use of this week. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction here to say this is a specialized version of UI view. Almost every app is going to make use of table views. So if you've ever seen vertically scrolling content where there's a number of rectangles, they could have anything displayed in them. They could have other controls like a text view or a switch or buttons or just a number of images and labels, then this is probably a UI table view. There are some built-in things like it has 3 built-in styles that we saw in the previous video when we went through and looked at some sections of the HIG. It has a concept of different sections. You can also have different cell types, and you can control for every single cell in your table view what type it uses. It also handles some things like selection, and there's built-in logic for things like row deletion and addition and even reordering controls, so you can drag and drop elements to reorder a list, for example. Here's a simple example of a table view which you'll produce as part of your lab exercise for this week. One thing that you need to be aware of when working with table views is you really need to think about structure. So you need to think in terms of the rows and section. Each section is made up of rows, and each row is displayed as a UI table view cell class instance or a custom subclass of this. And you have full control over how these are customized. One thing that is potentially confusing when you first use table views is that the way that the table view finds out what it should display is done via a delegate relationship with a data source delegate. So when the table view comes to be presented, the table view controller will ask its data source delegate, that could be a different class, or it could be the table view controller subclass itself, we'll use the latter in our lab example and the workshop example as well. And the first thing it's going to ask is how many sections are in this table view. So you should have a method that returns a number there. Then one by one for each section, it's going to say for this given section how many rows are in it and get a number of rows. And then for each row in each section, it's going to ask the data source delegate what is the cell that I should be displaying at this row. And in that case, it can return one of the standard cells or a custom cell. And when you want to change what's displayed in the table view, what you have to do is tell the table view that one of the sections is being reloaded, or it's having a row inserted at a particular position, or it's having a row deleted at a particular position. And when you do this, it will trigger the table view controller to go back and call the data source delegate again and ask it some of these same questions, which is, for a particular row or a particular section, how many rows are there now, and for those rows, which are the cells that should be being displayed there. And we'll go into more detail in the workshop to describe this. Collection view is a way of displaying a collection of elements, but in a less structured way than a table view. Or maybe just say less prescribed way. And often you can use it to show a series of tiles or cards or images, basically cells, but they could be in 2 columns or they could be in 5 columns. And you can do pretty much everything you can do in a table view, but there's additional capabilities as well. Also, collection views can scroll vertically and horizontally. And we'll work with collection views a bit more as part of an example in week 8. If you've seen the Photos app in iOS, it makes heavy use of collection views. One of the interesting things about collection views is they can make use of various layouts. So the very simple one with just a series of tiles is what's called a UI collection view flow layout, and you can just make use of that if that's all you want in terms of layout. But more recently, UI collection views have allowed us to create and compose more complicated types of layout together. We'll cover an in-depth example of this in week 8 as well. And this example shown on the right is different sections that themselves, the entire collection view is vertically scrolling, but then there's different sections within it, the groups, that can be that can scroll horizontally. And you might have seen something like this as part of the App Store iOS app that Apple distribute, where obviously you can see the sort of preview tiles up the top for feature things that are in a horizontally scrolling list, and inside a vertically scrolling list, and then this section of new to iPhone are also horizontally scrolling separate to the top one. They can be scrolled independently. And the last view I want to talk about is scroll views. So mostly we've been adding controls to just static views, but they're not scrollable. So if you have a device where there isn't enough physical space for all the controls, then really what you need to do is place your whole view within a scroll view. So you have a scroll view, it can scroll typically vertically, and you can scroll it down or up to show a subset of a larger view. Also, photo apps make use of scroll views when they allow panning and zooming of an image. So if you've had a photo, displayed it full screen on iOS, and pinched and zoomed in on it, that's a scroll view that you're using to move around. And most of the logic and functionality is pre-provided as part of scroll views. So we'll also look at these later in the unit. Okay, thanks for watching.